good morning, good evening, good afternoon, and remember, Context is Everything Media Network founder and CEO John Michael is reading a textbook, cover to cover. This one. Copyright date 2001. Cover to cover. World History as the Americans See It. So, we're in chapter 17, page 421. Chapter 17, section 3. Today, yesterday, chapter 17, section 2. So let's do a review of that. Chapter 17, section 2. Rebuilding France. Well, it's France under Louis XIV. Rebuilding France. Religious wars between the Huguenots and Catholics plagued the French from 1560s to 1590s. Henry IV became king and issued the Edict of Nantes in 1598, granting Huguenots religious tolerance. He rebuilt France's infrastructure and reduced the power of nobles, laying the foundation for royal absolutism. Richelieu and Mazarin continued to strengthen central government. After the Fronde Rebellion in 1648, Louis XIV resolved to govern France himself. He believed in divine right and famously declared, "I am the state." He strengthened the state by expanding the bureaucracy and creating a highly disciplined army. His finance minister, Colbert, followed mercantilist policies to make France wealthy. But Louis's extravagant court and foreign wars often left him short on cash. The Estates General did not meet during his reign. What is the Estates General? It didn't meet for like 200 years, and I'm not really sure what it is. Louis XIV transformed a hunting lodge, into a grand palace called Versailles, showcasing his wealth and power. Its halls and gardens were adorned with lavish decor, intricate designs, and the court of Versailles became central to political power. All right, enough of that. Section 3, Chapter 17. Triumph of Parliament in England. Setting the scene, the most high and absolute power in the realm consists in Parliament, wrote an English statesman in 1560s. He was voicing a tradition that had roots in the Middle Ages. But in 1603, a monarch with a different idea took the throne of England. "Kings are called gods," declared James I, "because gods sit upon the throne of earth." Before long, James was on a collision course with Parliament. In the 1600s, while Louis XIV perfected royal absolutism in France, weird tickle in the old sinuses. In this section, we will look at why and how. It just breaks me up, Parliament. Why and how Parliament asserted itself against royal power. The Tudors and Parliament. From 1485 to 1603, England was ruled by the Tudor dynasty. Although the Tudors believed in divine right, they shrewdly recognized a value of good relationships with Parliament. As you have read, when Henry VIII broke with Roman Catholic Church, he turned to Parliament to legalize his actions. Parliament approved the Act of Supremacy, making the monarch head of the Church of England. A constant need for money also led Henry to consult Parliament frequently. Although he had inherited a bulging treasury, he quickly used up his funds fighting overseas wars. To levy new taxes, the king had to seek approval of the Parliament. Members of the Parliament tended to vote as Henry's agents instructed. Still, they became accustomed to being consulted on important matters. Like her father, Elizabeth I, both consulted and controlled Parliament. Her advisors conveyed the Queen's wishes to the Parliament and forbade discussion for certain subjects, such as foreign policy or the Queen's marriage. Her skill in handling Parliament helped make good Queen Bess a popular and successful ruler. I guess Queen Elizabeth was called Queen Bess. B-E-S-S. The early Stuarts. Elizabeth died in 1603 without a direct heir. The throne passed to her relatives, the Stewards, the ruling family of Scotland. The Stuarts were neither as popular as the Tudors nor as skilled in dealing with Parliament. They also inherited problems that Henry and Elizabeth had long suppressed. The result was a century of revolution that pitted the Stuart monarchs against Parliament. The Royal Challenge. The first Stuart monarch, James I, had agreed to rule according to English laws and customs. Soon, however, he was lecturing Parliament about divine right. "I will not be content that my power be disputed upon," he declared. Leaders of the House of Commerce fiercely resisted the king's claim to absolute power. James repeatedly clashed with Parliament over money and foreign policy. He needed funds to finance his lavish court and wage wars. When members wanted to discuss foreign policy before voting funds, James dissolved Parliament and collected taxes on his own. What? He needed funds to finance his lavish court and wage wars. When members wanted to discuss foreign policy before voting funds, James dissolved Parliament and collected taxes on his own. I don't think I'm supposed to know what that means. James also found himself embroiled in disputes with dissenters, Protestants who differed with the Church of England, dissenters. One group called the Puritans sought to purify the Church of Catholic practices. Puritans called for simpler services and more democratic church without bishops. James rejected their demands, vowing, "Harry them out of this land or else do worse." Harry them out. They don't explain what these words mean, but I guess it means hurry. A positive result of the king's dispute with Puritans was his call for a new translation of the Bible, the King James Version, that appeared in 1611, as a lasting influence on the English language and literature. Parliament responds. By the way, the Bible that we see today was written in 1611, not when it was written. So, whatever. Parliament responds. In 1625, Charles I inherited the throne. Like his father, Charles behaved like an absolute monarch. He imprisoned his foes without trial and squeezed the nation for money. By 1628, though, his need to raise taxes forced Charles to summon Parliament. Before voting any funds, Parliament insisted that Charles sign the Petition of Right. It prohibited the king from raising taxes without the consent of Parliament or from imprisoning anyone without cause. Charles did sign the petition, but he then dissolved Parliament in 1629. For 11 years, he ignored the petition and ruled the nation without Parliament. During that time, he created bitter enemies, especially among Puritans. His Archbishop of Canterbury, William Laud, Laud, tried to force all clergy to follow strict Anglican rules, dismissing or imprisoning dissenters. Again, dissenters being Protestants who do not believe in the Anglican Church, or whatever, practices of the Anglican Church. In 1637, Charles Laud tried to impose the Anglican prayer book on Scotland. The Calvinist Scots revolted. To get funds to suppress the Scottish rebellion, Charles finally had to summon on Parliament in 1640. When he met, however, Parliament launched its own revolt. The Long Parliament. The 1640 Parliament became known as the Long Parliament because it lasted on and off until 1653. Its actions triggered the greatest political revolution in English history. In a mounting struggle with the king, Parliament tried to execute its chief ministers, including Archbishop Laud. It further declared that Parliament could not be dissolved without its own consent and called for the abolition of bishops. Charles lashed back. In 1642, he led troops into the House of the Commons to arrest its most radical leaders. They escaped through the back door and soon raised their own army. The clash now moved to the battlefield. I didn't know about the English Civil War. The English Civil War? I didn't know there was an English Civil War in 1642. The English Civil War. The Civil War that followed lasted from 1642 to 1649. Like the Fronde that occurred about the same time in France, the English Civil War posed a major challenge to absolutism. But while the forces of royal power won in France, in England the forces of revolution triumphed. Cavaliers and Roundheads. At first, the odds seemed in the favor of the Cavaliers, or supporters of Charles I. Many Cavaliers were wealthy nobles, proud of their plumed hats and fashionably long hair. Well trained in dueling and warfare, the Cavaliers expected a quick victory. But their foes proved to be tough fighters with the courage of their convictions. The forces of Parliament were composed of country gentry, town-dwelling manufacturers, and Puritan clergy. They were called Roundheads because their hair was cut so close to their heads. The Roundheads found a leader of genius. In Oliver Cromwell. A Puritan member of lesser gentry, Cromwell was a skilled general. He organized the New Model Army for Parliament into a disciplined fighting force. He organized the New Model Army for Parliament. That's not written right. He organized the New Model Army for Parliament into a disciplined fighting force. Inspired by Puritan chaplains, Cromwell's army defeated the Cavaliers in a series of decisive battles. I said series. So thought I was talking to Siri. And now I think that the video might have stopped, which would be really frustrating, wouldn't it? No, it didn't. Okay, on we go. Here we are. By 1647, the king was in the hands of the parliamentary forces. Cavaliers lost. Parliament won with a ragtag group of misfits. Roundheads, they call them. Execution of a king. Eventually, Parliament set up a court to put the king on trial. It condemned him to death as a tyrant, a traitor, a murderer, and public enemy. On a cold January day in 1649, Charles I stood on a scaffold surrounded by his foes. "I am a martyr for the people," he declared. Showing no fear, the king told the executioner that he himself would give the sign for him to strike. After a brief prayer, Charles knelt and placed his neck on the block. On the agreed signal, the executioner severed the king's head with a single stroke. Yikes. The execution sent shockwaves throughout Europe. In the past, kings had occasionally been assassinated or died in battle, but for the first time, a ruling monarch had been tried and executed by his own people. The parliamentary forces had sent a clear signal that in England no ruler could claim absolute power and ignore the rule of law. The Commonwealth. New heading: the Commonwealth. After the execution of Charles I, the House of Commons abolished the monarchy, the House of Lords, and the official Church of England. It declared England a republic, known as a Commonwealth, under the leadership of Oliver Cromwell. Challenges of the Commonwealth. The new government faced many threats. Supporters to Charles II, the uncrowned heir to the throne, attacked England by way of Ireland and Scotland. Cromwell led forces into Ireland to crush the uprising. He then took harsh measures against the Irish Catholic majority. In 1642, Parliament passed a law exiling most Catholics to barren lands of West Ireland. Any Catholic found disobeying this order could be killed on sight. That's harsh. Squabbles also splintered forces within the Commonwealth. One group called leviers, or levelers, Levellers, thought that poor men should have as much to say in government as the gentry, lawyers, and other leading citizens. The poorest he that is in England hath a life to live as the greatest he. Wrote Leveller. In addition, female levellers asserted their right to petition Parliament. These levellers' ideas horrified the gentry who dominated Parliament. Cromwell and his generals suppressed the levellers, as well as more radical groups who threatened property ownership. As the challenges to older order grew, Cromwell took the title of Lord Protector in 1653. From then on, he ruled through the army. Puritan society. Under the Commonwealth, Puritan preachers tried to root out godlessness and impose rule of saints. The English Civil War thus ushered in a social revolution, as well as a political one. Parliament enacted a series of laws designed to make sure that Sunday was set aside for religious observation. Anyone over the age of 14 who was caught performing on the Lord's Day could be fined. To the Puritans, theaters were spectacles of pleasure to commonly expressing mirth and levity. So, like John Calvin in Geneva, Cromwell closed all theaters. Puritans also frowned at the lewd dancing, taverns, and gambling. Puritans felt that every Christian, rich and poor, must be able to read the Bible. To spread religious knowledge, they encouraged education for all people. By mid-century, families from all classes were sending their children to school, girls as well as boys. Puritans pushed for changes in marriage to ensure greater fidelity. In addition to marriage based on business interests, they encouraged marriages based on love. As in the past, women were seen mainly as caretakers for the family, subordinate to men. When some radical Protestant groups allowed women to preach sermons, most Puritans were shocked Although Cromwell could not accept open worship by Roman Catholics, he believed in religious freedom for other Protestant groups. He even welcomed Jews back into England after more than 350 years of exile. That's a long time. End of the Commonwealth. Oliver Cromwell died in 1658, soon after the Puritans lost their grip on England. Many people were tired of military rule and strict Puritan ways. In 1660, a new elected Parliament invited Charles II to return to England from exile. England's kingless decade ended with the restoration of a monarchy. Yet Puritan ideas about morality, equality, government, and education endured. In the following century, these ideas would play an important role in shaping the United States of America. From Restoration to Glorious Revolution. In late May 1660, cheering crowds welcomed Charles II back to England. One supporter wrote, "This day came His Majesty Charles II to London, after a sad day and long exile, with a triumph of above 20,000 horses and soldiers, brandishing and swords, and shouting with inexpressible joy, the ways stewed with flowers, and bells a-ringing, the streets hung with tapestry." John Evelyn in his diary. With his charm and flawless wit, young Charles II was a popular ruler. He reopened theaters and taverns and presided over a lively court in the manner of Louis XIV. Charles restored the official Church of England, but tolerated other Protestants such as Presbyterians, Quakers, and Baptists. Although Charles accepted the Petition of Right, he shared his father's faith in absolute monarchy. He secretly had Catholic sympathies. Still, he shrewdly avoided his father's mistakes of dealing with Parliament. A new clash with Parliament. Charles' brother James II inherited the throne in 1658. Unlike Charles, James flaunted his Catholic faith. He further angered his subjects by suspending laws at whim and appointing Catholics to high office. Many English Protestants feared that James would restore the Roman Catholic Church. In 1688, alarmed parliamentary leaders invited James' Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch Protestant husband William III of Orange to become rulers of England. When William and Mary landed in their army late in 1688, James II fled to France. Let me read that again. In 1688, alarmed parliamentary leaders invited James' Protestant daughter Mary and her Dutch Protestant husband, William III of Orange, to become rulers of England, because he was Catholic sympathizer, James was. And Mary and William were Protestant, which is the way of England, Church of England. When William and Mary landed with their army in late 1688, James II fled to France. This bloodless overthrow of a king became known as the Glorious Revolution. English Bill of Rights, and we're almost there, folks. Thank you for listening. Before they could be crowned, William and Mary had to accept several acts passed by Parliament in 1689 that became known as the English Bill of Rights. The Bill of Rights ensured the superiority of Parliament over the monarchy. It required the monarch to summon Parliament regularly and gave the House of Commons the power of the purse. A king or queen could no longer interfere in parliamentary debates or suspend laws. The Bill of Rights also barred any Roman Catholics from sitting on the throne. The Bill of Rights also restated the traditional rights of English citizens, such as trial by jury. It abolished excessive fines and cruel or unjust punishment. It affirmed the principle of habeas corpus. That is, no person could be held in prison without first being charged with a specific crime. Later, the Toleration Act of 1689 granted limited religious freedom to Puritans, Quakers, and other dissenters. Though not yet to Catholics, still only members of the Church of England could hold public office. Looking ahead. The Glorious Revolution did not create democracy, but a type of government called a limited monarchy, in which a constitution or legislative body limits the monarch's power. English rulers still had much power, but they had to obey the law and govern in partnership with Parliament. In the age of absolute monarchy elsewhere in Europe, the limited monarchy in England was a radical enough change. Thank you for listening, folks. I hope you have a good day. I hope the Knicks survive tonight, because they are on the brink of being eliminated from the 2023 playoffs, unceremoniously in the second round, by the 8th seed, which means the team that had the worst record that made the playoffs in the East. Very good team, though.